Hey, Mo. Sorry, not Mo.
Hey, Mo. Hey, where's Mo?
Up at the top of Mo. And Mo just texted me. What's up, Houdini?
What's going on, D-Rex?
How are you, my man? It's good to have you here on our first blab together, blabbing it out. It's a pretty awesome little setup we got going here. Talking fantasy football. It is 2016. It is the off season, and for us, as you and I know, there is no off season, and we are excited today to talk about running backs versus wide receivers. It really mostly in the early rounds, but with the way the game's changed and the day of the bell cow back. And the days of running backs throwing up 20-plus touchdowns and getting 30-plus carries really dwindling. I think it's an important topic matter for us to cover here and going through, hey, look at the landscape, how it's changed. Look at what the wide receivers are doing. It's not set in stone, and we're going to have a good discussion here today to go through it and talk the ins and outs and see all different sides of it. But earlier and earlier, it's looking like the running backs aren't your go-to in those first two rounds nearly as much as they used to be. I still think there's some exceptions, and we will discuss that. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Couldn't beat the weather that we just had here in Chicago over the last 2 days, being in the 50s and crazy wind on Friday. But yesterday was absolutely gorgeous. So, all good. Feeling good.
Good, my friend. Yeah, it was nuts, dude. It was like a tornado. Didn't know what was going on there. All on Friday, my dog was going nuts. She was loving it out there. I got some videos of her like trying to walk against the wind. But at the end of the day, we did get a couple. We got that spring tease that we always get in Chicago, which we need and we love. But at the same time, it makes it all the more painful when it drops back down to it's only 40 today. But why don't we get into it? I know that you've been doing Pyro and Pyro podcasts, and if you aren't familiar with the people, check out our Pyro podcast. It's Pyromaniac.com. We do a weekly podcast. We're actually in the middle of a hibernation right now, which is awesome. Taking 2 or 3 weeks off, which we never do, just because we never do it, and we really needed to recharge and get a little break from it. But your thing over the course of, say, the last you weren't as much on it last year heading into the 2015 season, but the 2 seasons previous to that, you were a really staunch believer in the running back approach. You wanted to get that best running back because you felt like they were – I'll let you take it away. Tell me a little bit about your thought process then, where it's kind of merged and morphed to now.
Yeah, so basically it started about 3 seasons ago. And what's great is I have this growing document that I always put out every year with my draft strategy. It's in my draft manifesto. And what I call it is drafting running backs with your first 2 picks. So I go back as far as 2010, and I keep investigating what's going on with the top scoring running backs, the top scoring wide receivers, looking at, say, the top 10, then the next 11 through 20, and so on and so forth. And what I found is, first with the running back position, you've had basically, it's been a different running back that has been on top, the top scorer every year over the last 6 years. Because even when you go to last year, where the numbers come out, and I want to make sure I'm using the right ones. I was using our FFA ones that we have in our system, and the top running back actually was not Adrian Peterson. It was Devonta Freeman. And Devonta Freeman last year only scored 247.9 fantasy points. Well, that's a huge departure from what we had been seeing, where the top running back has scored over the previous 3 to 5 previous seasons over 300 fantasy points. And that number one player has averaged 305 points per season. So that's great production. But now we see 247 from last year, 248. That's a huge drop. But that drop, which is the more crazy thing to me, is how it just keeps dropping precipitously down the rankings. When you go to check this out. So for the first time ever, we only had 3 running backs last year to put up over 200 fantasy points. 3. You had 6 wide receivers put up over 200 fantasy points. And when you look at the number one, yes, you still had the running backs outscored wide receivers because Devonta Freeman with his 247.9 just edged Antonio Brown's 246.2. So that separation right there says, well, why do you have to go running back in those first picks? But I have even more reasons why you should definitely be holding off.
Can I say one thing? Go back. Hey, it's 2000. We're heading into 2016. Let's take a look at 10 years ago. You and I have been doing fantasy football since 88. You've been doing fantasy football since 93 or 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time. So check out how the days have changed and the trends have changed. 2006. Let's go back 10 years ago. LaDainian Tomlinson had 416 points.
Yeah, 416.
416 points, okay? So he had 28 touchdowns on the ground. He had 1,800 yards. He carried. One thing we got to talk about during the show is just the amount of carries and the way that number's gone down so much. In that season, Larry Johnson had 416 carries. And LT in that year had three receiving yards and 500 as well. So think about that. That's 400 yards. And then now you're saying that
let's give it the position here too. The top wide receiver in 2006 was Marvin Harrison, who had 95 catches for 1,366 yards and 12 scores. Only how many points did you say, Sean?
416 for LaDainian, and Larry Johnson had 329.
Marvin Harrison had 206.6, and that was the only wide receiver that was over 200 points.
Unbelievable. And to go to your number on how many people were over 200 points in this season, 2006, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players were over 200. There was another 5 players beneath them that were in the 180s. Guys like Liddell Betts, Marion Barber, Deuce McAllister's, Chester Taylor's. So just think about that. And then in this season, there was obviously 400-point season by LaDainian. There was 2. Steven Jackson and Larry Johnson had 300-point-plus points. So you just look at it, and you're just looking at apples and oranges. Those trends 10 years ago, that's when a lot of people were just, you got to take, well, how could you not take that difference and go for that running back? Times have changed.
There's 2 major differences in where all those points were coming from too, right? One was the sheer amount of touchdowns that were being scored by running backs back then. LaDainian with 28, Larry Johnson with 17, 13 for Steven Jackson, and 13 for Willie Parker, 13 for Maurice Jones-Drew, 12 for Rudy Johnson, 14 for Marion Barber. You know, and you also had all these guys who were putting up rushing yards, not even getting their receiving yards, over 1,500 yards. Yeah. There were so many of them. Well, now you look at last year, and you're looking at the running backs. You didn't have anybody go over 1,500 rushing yards.
Yeah,
Adrian Peterson at 1,485 led the way. You only had, 4 running backs with double-digit touchdowns, with the leader being with 11 rushing touchdowns.
There was only 7,000-yard rushers in the league last year. That is crazy. 7,000-yard rushers. Look at the numbers. Running backs, 10-plus touchdowns. 5 guys did it. That's just rushing. And then if you added total touchdowns, you would get up to 7 players. 7 running backs had 10 total touchdowns, meaning accumulation of both rushing and catching balls. Now, your favorite stat is go to the flip side. Look at the wide receivers from last year and how many went over 1,000. What's the number there? 20.
So, yeah, let me pull this one back up. So let me go back to 2015.
Wide receivers went over 1,000-yard threshold last year.
Well, and it's like I think in there are some tight ends, right? Because there are 3 tight ends that went over 1,000 yards. But if you, because it was a total of 22 wide receivers, 22. And I think this is where it becomes interesting, right? Because for me, where you'd always seen the separation was when you start going down and saying, okay, well, what about the difference of, why do you need to get that top running back? Because the difference between number 1 and number 10 is so vast. Well, it's not that way anymore. So where Devonta Freeman had the 247, and now you slide it all the way down to number 10, right, with Latavius Murray last year, who scored 165.8. So you go, oh, well, that's like an 80-point difference. Well, but what about wide receivers? the 246.2 from Antonio Brown, you go down to number 10, you got Calvin Johnson with 175.4. Now, that's also less of a separation, and it's also more points than the number 10 running back. So wide receivers putting up ridiculous points, and there tend to be safer points. Wouldn't you agree? That when you're looking at these players from a health standpoint in this league where concussions rule the world, you need a guy that plays every week.
The only really lights out wide receiver I can think that got injured last year, and he was crushing it. I think he was the number one wide receiver. No, probably number 2 or 3 behind Brown and Julio. But is Allen, Keenan Allen on San Diego was lighting it up. So he's the only guy I can really think of that went down with an injury that really but Dez Bryant, he never really got started. But yeah, Dez Bryant obviously got hurt as well. Edelman got banged up later on that cost him plenty of points. But, yeah, for sure, you're going to be more reliable, and it's probably more likely that you're going to get those 16 games out of your wide receiver. I guess Sammy Watkins was banged up at the beginning. But when you look at these numbers up and down for these wide receivers and the horses, the guys that went early, you're seeing mostly 16 and 15 games. And for a guy like Odie Bagg, he only played 15, but that's because he got suspended. It wasn't an injury.
Right. And the thing is, too, is that you've seen not only is it just in the top wide receivers that have improving, that improvement goes all the way down, even when you go to number 30. So, for example, the 20th best running back last year was Ronnie Hillman. How excited were you to have a Ronnie Hillman on your team?
I had him on my team. I had to slot him in maybe 2 weeks, and I cried both times, and he shit the bed both times on me.
And he scored 139.4 points. Now, conversely, the number 20 wide receiver happens to be one of your favorite guys, Crabtree.
Yep.
And Crabtree outscored him, scoring 146.2. So 7 more points being scored by the 20th wide receiver. Well, let's drop it down to number 30 running back. Yeah. Well, the 30th running back was LeGarrette Blount, who obviously missed some time, but finished with 116.6. Number 30 wide receiver is Kamar Aiken at 124.4. So
100. You go down to 35 at Willie Snead to get, and it's still more than LeGarrette Blount.
Right. So the amount of points that are being scored here, and this is where the difference was. Well, the difference used to be when we're talking about these 400-point running backs, 330-point running backs, and Larry Johnson, or guys that were averaging in the last since 2010. It's been about 305 points before Devonta Freeman's under 250 performance last year. This signals a major change in how the NFL is playing and how fantasy needs to be addressed at this position, because you no longer have that dominant player who's at the top of that running back position that is just far and away scoring so many more fantasy points. And it's a different running back every time. And you're not getting the amazing touchdown production that you got in years past, because it's become, well, we want to have at least 2 good running backs in our stables. So when I looked at the difference between now, if you drop off those 3 top 200-point running backs last year, so you go to number 4, which is D'Angelo Williams, who scored somewhere in the 194 range. But the difference between him and the 20th running back, as far as points scored from that number 4 guy, was 54 points. And the difference between that and the number 30th running back was only 76.8 points.
And Williams was, except for people that went and drafted him to handcuff with a bell, just because Bell was out those first 2 games, which was actually surprisingly not – he wasn't drafted nearly as much as you would think, because people thought he was done. He had a crappy previous 3 seasons or so with the Panthers leading up to it, and people just thought his days were done. So this is a guy that finished in that slot, but he was essentially undrafted. Where when you go to the wide receiver position, and that's a reason why I'm all for holding off on the running back, is because there's so many guys that you look in the top 30 that were not drafted. They just come out of nowhere, or there are a lot of rookies that you should be stocking up on now in this day and age. Just to what if, a Rawls is a good example of that. A David Johnson's a good example of that. But if you're looking at the stats, those top 10 wide receivers, none of them came out of nowhere. They're kind of the top 10 guys, other than Doug Baldwin, and Fitz kind of outdid himself. But other than Doug Baldwin, who is still drafted, but in every league, are the horse guys. So you kind of know where you're going, you know what you're getting. Whereas we've talked about this in the Pyro podcast before. Think about the first round running backs that fell flat on their face last year. Let's
Every one of them.
Essentially every one of them. And AP had an okay season, but, whatever. So we know that what's-his-name got hurt. Le'Veon Bell, he was usually taken in the first round. Marshawn Lynch, obviously, got banged up. Charles, who?
Eddie Lacy.
Eddie Lacy. So, Charles, there's 4.
T.J. Anderson.
Yes, there you go.
You had Matt Forte, who was having a decent season, then he got hurt.
Yep. So there you go. These guys, and Forte might have been more of a second rounder, but you see the numbers right there. Like those guys we're all just like taken in the first round. Oh, you got to get that workhorse, so that you got to be secure at running back because so it drops off so fast. How'd that work out for you? How does that work out for you?
This is the whole point. So when I'm talking about that difference between that number 4 running back D'Angelo and where it goes down to, you go 16 running backs further down, and it's only a 54-point difference. So that's like a 3-point difference per game, or 3 to 3.5 point difference per game, right? So that was where the argument always was. Well, you need to get one of those top running backs because that point differential between number 20 and number 30 is so big that you can't wait to draft those running backs later. Well, that's not true because look at what it is from the wide receivers. Number 4 scoring wide receiver last year was Allen Robinson, okay? You compare him to how many more points he scored than the number 20 wide receiver of Crabtree, where we said at the running back position it was a 54-point difference. It's 78-point difference for those wide receiver versus the number 20 wide receiver. And then where it was down to 77 points between running backs at number 30 and number 4, well, it was almost 100 points, 99.6, the difference between the 30th wide receiver, who still scored more than the 30th running back, and that number 4 wide receiver. So what does this tell me? This tells me that, number 1, we've already discussed that the safety of drafting those wide receivers at the top is so much better as far as knowing that they're going to stay healthy. And then number 2, when you're looking at that separation now, you need to have one of these top wide receivers. You don't want to be sitting there with your number 1 wide receiver being, the number 10 guy, Calvin Johnson, who's scoring 175, where somebody else has got Antonio or Julio or A-Rob or one of these guys who's putting up 236.
Yep. No,
and all you're getting in return is a difference of now you grabbed that number 1 running back who's now, instead of scoring 300 points, is only scoring 250. And I can wait until the 20th wide running back, and I'm only going to end up taking the guy who's going to get 196. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm right there with you, and I got better production by grabbing the top wide receivers.
Absolutely. So another thing is just getting, we're a big thing with targets, touches, and looks here at Pyro, and you can't score fantasy points without getting the ball. Now, running backs are still getting more carries, and then when you add in the targets they get and the receptions, there's more opportunities. There's just not many wide receivers that are getting a ton of targets in the passing game and, running the ball a ton. There's not many running guys whatsoever. It's one of the reasons why I love Martavis Bryant, and a reason why you love the kid number 11 on the Rams. He actually gets plenty of carries, Austin. But you look at the target share that's going to these wide receivers and how much, still, again, the top 10 running backs, I think, there's a number of guys that had 200 carries, where there's not really anyone at wide receiver that had over there's one guy that had over 200 targets, and that's Julio Jones. It was so much closer.
It was 15 players that had 200 carries or more at running back.
So 15 players, and then at wide receiver, it's not there yet, but the targets are getting so much larger, and even for the tight ends as well, that it's getting closer where the opportunity to get, and we obviously know that a catch, an average yards per catch is going to blow away an average yards per carry. So right. The fact that they're even in the same hemisphere now in the carries for a running back and how many targets and attempts for a running back and how many targets wide receivers are getting shows you even more. Okay, the gap is closing so much at that position. Why not take advantage of it? Why not? I mean, in all honesty, it depends on where I'm drafting in the first round. But right now, if I've got an early first round pick, I'm going with one of the wide receivers. I want Julio. I want Antonio Brown. I'll take an ODB. we'll see. Those I think those are the 4 guys that are really, really worth that early first round pick. Now, if I'm in the later half of that first round and a guy like Bell falls to me, if everyone's on this wide receiver bandwagon, then, I want to counteract that. And, something that I say on the podcast as well is when people are running, I like to walk. When people are walking, I like to run. I think that's the best way to make it distinguished, better. One, you can lead runs in drafts. 2, you can be finding the value when everyone else is clamoring to fill up other positions. It really, really surprisingly, if you make awesome tiers and work hard on your tiers in the preseason, doing that walking when people are running and running when people are walking puts you in control of the draft. It's unbelievable. And at the end of it, everyone's like, Jesus, man, you really walked out of there. And it's just you're in control. You're setting the tone for the thing. So you just don't know. I want that wide receiver, but at the end, I don't want to distinguish and not go with one of these great running backs because, again, the ADP and the value is there. So use it in your advantage. If the first 5 picks are Gronk and 4 wide receivers, and you're sitting there at the 7th pick, you got 8. I mean, I got Bell with the 8th or 9th pick last year, and AP went 1 pick before him. Now we're in a heavy quarterback league in that one, so I think Luck was the first pick overall, but just make sure you're smart enough. And we always tell people not to go into any draft with a preset notion of what you're doing. I don't think it's a great pick when you've got a couple awesome running backs if you're going for AJ Green in the first round just because he's one of the top 5 wide receivers.
Well, see, at the same time, though, too, it's one of these things that I think we're going to see what the evolution of this is. I can't wait as we get to May and June, July, and I start looking at what are the ADPs that are coming across from all of the all of our expert sites where people are projecting, because it's I think that we're at a day and age now where you can't be surprised if someone goes wide receiver with the first overall pick, if someone wants to grab an Antonio Brown or something like that. And I think that it should come to the point where it used to be, going back 10 years, if you had a 12-team league, there were at least 10 running backs that were taken in every first round. I think that now we're in a situation where maybe in a 12-team league, it should be almost, maybe 1 tight end, maybe a Gronkowski, maybe it's 5 running backs, and 6 wide receivers that should be taken in that first round. And I look at the things from last year too, because to the point that you were saying, where do you take AJ Green with that late first round pick just because he's one of those top guys? Well, I looked at it where I had the number 11 pick in my draft, and that people were still going heavy at the front. Like Gronkowski actually was the 3rd pick in our draft, and then it was heavy running backs. And so then when it was 2 picks ahead of me, there were still the 3 wide receivers out there. There was Antonio Brown, Dez Bryant, and Julio. Well, Julio fell to me. And then I'm coming back on the wraparound with the second, pick in the second round, and C.J. Anderson's there. And I know how much we were talking about the running back thing. But I looked back and it's like, God, how stupid. I had an opportunity to pair Julio Jones with Odell Beckham Jr. And you just think about what kind of a difference that would make. And then it ended up that I ended up not starting C.J. Anderson, I want to say, for about like 8 or 9 weeks in the beginning, first 12 weeks of the season, because he was doing nothing.
And you're never going to have that issue no matter what with one of these explosive wide receivers.
No.
They're always going to play no matter what. They might dud on you sometimes, but they're matchup proof. So, and you'll never make that mistake again. To be able to pair that kind of double explosive action at the wide receiver position, it's a no-brainer where you think, oh, wait, let me shore up this running back. Then I can go and I've got some flexibility. Get the double banger. Get the guys where it's like, say hello to my wide receivers each week. Whoever you are playing is like, oh my God, I am scared shitless of Houdini's. What Houdini's throwing out there on the flanker in the slot position. It's unbelievable.
And you absolutely should be. And again, the numbers prove it. I mean, the fact that we've just seen how it used to be, you could take the average of the top 10 running backs, and it was going to be higher than the average of the top 10 wide receivers. Well, not anymore. You could take the average of 11 through 20 in running backs, and they were going to be higher, even if it was just slightly, than 11 through 20 wide receivers. Not true anymore. And the difference now is slighted so much into the favor of those wide receivers that you are so much better off waiting on these running backs and stockpiling. Because if you grab, let's say you spent your first 2 or 3 out of your first 4 rounds on wide receivers. Well, now you're grabbing from the top of that all those tiers. Well, what's going to happen when you get to the running backs that are when you're going to start drafting them in rounds 5, 6, 7, 8? That's usually where you get the values. That's where you're going to get your LeGarrette Blunts, your Danny Woodheads, your guys that are sneaking under the radar. Grab your rookie running back at that point in time and be able to wait on them and understand these things that it's all committees now. So there's no reason to be running ahead. And again, this has become a complete passing league in the NFL, and that has a major impact on fantasy. And the impact is that the running backs are not as important as they used to be.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the top ones aren't great, but when you have the guys that can put up the major points and you go down from the top 30 and the separation becomes that much larger from the top wide receivers and those bottom ones, and those bottom oones are still outscoring comparable running backs, I mean, that's writing on the wall to me.
And it works also with many different formats. Okay, let's say you're in an older kind of league and you're really focused on touchdowns. Look at this. Wide receivers for touchdowns, 10 wide receivers had 10-plus touchdowns this year. 10 of them. As we talked earlier, that was only total touchdowns, only 7 running backs. Now you go down at wide receivers, 16 had 9 or more. 16 wide receivers had 9 or more.
5 running. Oh, wait. Combined total touchdowns. You got to go total touchdowns.
5 for 10, but combined had 7. So still pedestrian numbers. But a wide receiver, 10-plus was 10 people, 10 players at wide receiver. 9 or more TDs was 16 wide receivers. And then there was an additional wide receivers that had 8 touchdowns. So that's 20 players had 8 or more touchdowns at the wide receiver position, where you don't even hit you get 7. No, you get around that. I didn't do the math on the running backs, but you get what I'm saying. It's like if you're in more of a less of a yardage league and you're in more of a touchdown league, it still works in your favor in a lot of regards with these wide receivers. Now, we know that trends change in fantasy football. So could this year all of a sudden, running backs and all the horses stay healthy like they didn't last year? Last year I had on my team, listen to these guys that when they went down were top. I think they were all top 10 players. LeGarrette Blount, he was top 10 when he went down. CJ2K, top 10 when he went down. Rawls was top 10 when he went down. Obviously, Bell wasn't top 10, but he was the best running back. Those guys all got injured last year. So that's not going to happen with wide receivers. Now, the question is the trends that change. The game changes. The season every year, maybe all those running backs stay healthy and the numbers are bigger. So then we're all singing a different song going into the 2017 season. It can happen. But I'd rather be doing that after it happens than taking a hunch and saying going running back heavy this year and going against the grain that all these numbers that we're throwing out at you say. Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I'm telling you too, though. I don't see that it's going to go back that way because with all the attention that everyone's paying to concussions and to everything else and to what we know, how they view the life of a running back and every team now, instead of wanting to have just 2 running backs, a lot of them want to have 3 running backs. So that's just extra competition. You're not the days of the 400 carries and 300 carries are basically done. Yes, you can go back and say, okay, well, last year Adrian Peterson had over 300 carries, but he was the only one. And you only had 5 running backs that had over 250 carries. And, another one of those is an old guard guy in Frank Gore. So that's not the type of player that's coming out now. That's not the type of offenses that are being run, which is why at the same time you're seeing quarterbacks like Blake Bortles or such who throw for over 4,000 yards and 25 or 27 touchdowns, and they're not a top 10 quarterback. Because everyone's throwing for over 4,000 yards now. That's the game. So for me, it's like I think you're better off. The day of the workhorse back is done. The day of teams getting inside the 5-yard line and just saying we're going to outbig you and we're going to shove 25 touchdowns through our running back are done. So you want to have the dual threat running backs, and I think that you want to have the guy who's going to be kind of like Forte when he was coming out, right? Guy who's going to give you maybe 700-800 rushing yards, but also give you 600 receiving yards, and be these dual threat guys that are going to be successful in offenses today. And the other thing is that you're just when you take a running back who was normally getting 300, 325, 330 carries, and now you're saying total touches you're going to go down to, and that was just carries. So now let's say total touches from like around 360. Now you're only going to be about 290 on average or so. That's a lot of touches that you're missing out on getting points for. Where these wide receivers went from, I think Marvin Harrison, when we went back to 2006, was the only guy that had he was actually had 179 targets, and you said that Julio had 203. So his 179 would have put him at number 5 this year, and he was far and away the leader back in 2006. So these guys are getting a lot more opportunities in the receiving game too, and defenses have yet to figure out the right balance to stop them. So
and I think there's a little bit of reverb. Are you hearing that? But I think in general you've got it's gone. In general, you've also got something to consider. Is I think that the 5,000-yard passing games are going to start coming down to earth a little bit. How many did we have? We had 0 this year, but obviously a ton of 4,000 yarders. But I think the 5,000-yard games are coming down a little bit. But the average media, the lowest, the floor, so to speak, has raised significantly. If you look at player rankings and tiers, I've been working on my tiers all weekend. I'm trying to get my first version of my tiers done and up on the site by tomorrow. And we're doing it for our draft kit. Our Pyro draft kit is coming out on March 15th. We have the best draft kit out there, bar none. I mean, the thing is just ridiculous. And if you buy that draft kit early, if you buy it day one, you get every version from day one until the drafts come out. So we're working on that, but I'm adding, and we all add our tiers into that. But in looking at the tiers, it is insane. And I know we're talking about running backs and wide receivers here, but it is insane in the membrane how many the top 15 quarterbacks. It's insane. I mean, you're Matt Ryans are like barely 15. You've got Dalton, barely 15. You got Romo, who's barely 15. You got Cousins, barely 15. Think about all these guys. You love your Jameis Winston and the upside he's going to have for next year. He's a barely top 15 guy. A Mariota, barely. There's so many great quarterbacks that it's hard to fathom. So something to think about, another reason to hammer in on those wide receivers early, and then in those 3, 4, 5, 6 round area, that's when you start filling in your running backs as well. Maybe you go with one of the top tight ends in that zone, but you just don't have to worry about a quarterback at all through the first 6 rounds. You just don't. You're going to be able to get a Wilson. You're going to be able to get. I said it before. I got Cam Newton last year.
This is my point. Who were the top quarterbacks that were going off the board last year?
I mean, the top ones were Brady was on suspended. No one knew if he was suspended. So he went in the 12th round in one of my leagues, and then the day later he's not suspended. That guy was psyched. But Aaron Rodgers, Breeze, Palmer was lower. Stafford always was up in there for whatever reason. Ben Roethlisberger, people were super high on him last year. Andrew Luck was probably the consensus one overall. He finished 20. He only played 7 games, and most of them, he only played 5 games, probably healthy.
Here's my point. So
healthy.
Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, maybe Breeze, right? Breeze was the highest finisher. Breeze finished with the 6th most points at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, vaunted Aaron Rodgers was number 7 with only 301 points, and obviously Andrew Luck. Well, he fell way down because he missed all those games, but. You had your Cam Newton, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Blake Bortles, Carson Palmer. That was your top 5. So, and again, when you see the amount of the passing that's being done by all these quarterbacks now that are all throwing for over 4,000 yards, like you mentioned, the difference in points as well at the quarterback position is very similar to what's happened at the running back position. By all these teams throwing so much, the separation now is no longer – oh, my God, I have to have one of these top-tier quarterbacks, because the difference between getting the number 1 quarterback and the number 10 quarterback used to be a huge difference. Well, it's not that way anymore.
Fitzmagic had 6 or 7 points less than Aaron Rodgers. Magic. And then Schultz, you mentioned Cousins. I believe I mentioned Cousins as one of those guys that's in the top 15. I'm super high on him. We put out a piece earlier this week, 2 days ago, called Shine on You Crazy Diamonds in the Rough. And Cousins is my in the rough guy. Right now, I think he's an ADP on the fantasy football calculator and similar sites. Cousins' ADP right now is like 14 or 13. And think about that. That is ridiculous because he's got that explosion factor. But yeah, there's just so many guys that are in there that you don't have to worry. And I'm high on Cousins, but you're going to be able to get Cousins. I don't care even if he has an incredible preseason because it's Washington, because there's so many other guys at the position. Cousins is not going to be I doubt he'll be a top 10 quarterback taken in any fantasy league. And he's worth it. I think he finishes top 10, but he's going to slip and there's going to be value.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, too, because you're going to get to start to see now at this point in time, too. If you look at these quarterbacks that finished last year, would you start with Fitzpatrick, who was 11, and let's go down to Matt Ryan, who was at 19, precipitous fall. But you had in there Fitzpatrick, followed by Phillip Rivers, then Jameis Winston, Derek Carr, Tyrod Taylor, Alex Smith, Ryan Tannehill, Andy Dalton, Matt Ryan. Well, I look at got some of these young guys. So look for a Jameis Winston, a Derek Carr, and a Tyrod Taylor to take precipitous steps forward. Look for Ryan Tannehill, who's going to now be in Adam Gase's offense, and hopefully that changes things for him. Even an Andy Dalton who fell off, well, he's going to get the benefit of no longer being under Hugh Jackson anymore, who's now in Cleveland. So while they have those running backs there, is it maybe that they're going to start to throw things back toward the passing game? Very possible.
And if he hadn't gotten hurt, he would have had over 30 touchdowns. He would have had over 4,000 yards. And he was actually, I believe, when he went down, I think he was about sixth quarterback.
Started out so hot at the first 4 weeks of the season. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. So, let's move this back over. The reason why we mentioned that is just because in years past, a lot of people are like, in the fourth round, I'm grabbing my Roethlisberger. Or fifth round, I'm grabbing my Roethlisberger. I love Acosta Sperberger as much as anybody, but he can't seem to stay healthy. And you look at the numbers right there. He was 21st, and he played 12 games. You can't really rely on him to be there. Now on the flip side, in my keeper league, I kept Luck, and it cost me a 6th or 8th round pick because I got him the year before in the 10th round. And the reason why I did that is because there was no way, of course, Luck, of all players in the world, is going to play all 16 games. One of them got Hassoid right up in my taint on that one. But you just never know which guys are going to go every game. We all know that. But there's likelihood of certain players making it better than others. And when you've got this much talent at the position, you can wait. So back to running back position, that was fun to look at how awesome running backs were back in 2006. I hope they come back to there. And who are the first rounders in running back this year heading in? Just think off the top of your head, spitballing here. Who are the guys that if you're sitting there in a 12-man league, wherever you're sitting, whether it's first or second, whether it's in the middle at the 5, 6, 7, or at the end, that you would consider right now taking in the first round?
It's so interesting because as I look at the running backs now, where you normally just are like, oh, I got to get one of these guys. There are these 5 that are for sure I need to get. I don't know who they are right now. And that's where I'm completely running away from the position because, okay, you want to say Devonta Freeman, right? For everything that he's shown.
Not me. I'm staying away from that guy.
Because there's a lot of question marks there. Then you got Adrian Peterson. Well, you got Tevin Coleman. But Adrian Peterson, well, with his age and all the mileage that he has on him, how much longer is that going to go?
And as someone that had Adrian Peterson in 2 leagues, for the first overall, which I took him, it wasn't that great. I would have much rather had Brown or a Julio Jones across the board, both in the way that they showed up in those final 2 games. Julio Jones, obviously against Norman Bates Motel, went off and exploded. But just the way that both those guys opened the season, just exploding. And you remember Adrian Peterson's first game was a total dud. I was like, oh my God, what Zimmer doesn't know what he's doing. They're not going to run. I can't believe that I did this. Adrian Peterson, for the fact that he was the 2nd overall running back and he had led the league in yards for the position, underwhelming season. I think he had 2 pretty big games and a lot of real plotter.
Yeah, and that's the
outings.
problem. So, when I'm looking at these top guys, I want guys that I know I draft you for my 13-game regular season. You're going to win me my week at least 3 times. For sure, 2 at least 3 times. There's not any of these guys that I look on that list that I feel that type of confidence with. Now, I know that if I were to spend that on a Julio or an Antonio Brown, they're going to win me a week, if not 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I think Gurley and David Johnson are guys that I think could do it, but couldn't Gurley be just in for? I mean, I want to see what they do at quarterback. I want to see what happens to that team. Gurley, it could just be right out of the gates a different Gurley, and he was just stroked with a bit of luck this year. Great player, obviously, but what he was doing in those 4 games versus what he did the rest of the season, it was a little bit, he kind of fell back to earth. David Johnson, I like him a lot because he's on a great team, and he can score. He's a beast, and he can catch. I like the fact that he's
Gurley is awesome. Gurley, got to remember now, he's going to be finally fully recovered because he came back early from that injury that there was no way he should have been playing as early as he was. So I'm not worried about Gurley. Yeah. He's definitely a first-round running back selection. David Johnson is not, because is he a guy that you're going to count on that's going to get those bulk load of carries, and you're going to risk a first-round draft pick on David Johnson? I find that hard to do. So, and I think that now we're also at the point in time where, now that Marshawn Lynch is stepping away and we're having like all these guys. It was amazing that D'Angelo Williams had the resurgence that he had last year in his career. But are you going to put any stock into him? And no, because he's going to be with Le'Veon Bell. So Bell is probably still a guy that's up there because he fits that mold of that running back that I want, who can run the ball inside, but is also a devastating receiver out of the backfield. So he's the dual threat.
Jeremy Hill was a top guy in last year's draft. He wasn't a first rounder last year even, but nobody's coming back into that zone. Jeremy Hill, you're just not going to do. Red Monkey Eyes is talking about Bernard, but it's like, again, that's the reason why you stay away from both those guys. It's just as much as I like the Bengals as an offense, those guys are going to be eating each other. There's a serious community and committee going on there. And you just don't know what's going to happen with that offense. So I'm staying away. Bernard's a value pick. Hill will fall because he burned a lot of owners, like I know he burned you last year. But we'll see. So he'll fall, but at the same time, if I'm doing the wide receiver approach, am I feeling good as Hill being in the 3rd round or something, being my first running back?
No, and that's when I start looking at it. And that's the way I think you have to look at it when you're doing your mock drafts and you're going through it and you're saying, okay, so you grab that receiver in the 1st round, it's coming back to you in the 2nd round. And then there's always that fear. So let's say that you took a receiver and you were in the top 4 picks of your draft, right? So then you're waiting all the way for it to come back. Grab that other receiver there. I almost say grab 2 more receivers. Now you got your 3. If you start 3 wide receivers, boom, you've just locked it up. Those running backs that you're missing out on, are they anything that is going to get you excited in any way, shape, or form? Usually not. That you're sitting there, unless you're going, wow, I got lucky and this guy slid back to me. But that separation is just not there anymore. So I feel more confident if I was at that front of the draft. Let me get if I'm picking 3rd, right, in a 12-team league. So 3 of the top 27 picks, and I'm going to spend them all on wide receivers, which means I have 3 of the top, say, 14 wide receivers taken. Well,
I love it. And you can get with that 3rd round pick, you can get like an Evans, you can get a Brandon Cooks, you can be getting that kind of the way that Demaryius Thomas might be falling this year. Not that I really want him, but it's in general. You're going to be able to get Watkins back there. You're going to be able to get a lot of good players. How exciting are they
to you than those running backs you're listing off at number 12, 13, 14? It's like. It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. And then, I agree. That's a great point. Grab the first, go wide receiver with those first 3, And now then you kind of the next 3 rounds, you shouldn't be taking a wide receiver unless the value's there and your league lets you do a run and shoot, which we've got to remember. That's something that happens in leagues now. My league's been doing it for about the last 15 years, but if you're a league and know your rules, that's your big moniker, and that's a great one to have, is know your league's rules. You should be able to, in your league, do the run and shoot, where you only have to play an I back and one running back is all you have to slot in, and you can play 4 wide receivers. Now think about that. Know your rules, and if your league doesn't let you do it, I would push for it. Now, in certain worlds, if you're doing flex as well, that means you could be potentially throwing out 5 wide receivers. That's all the more reason to be going wide receiver with those early picks. And believe me, a number of times last year in the league that I won, I was going run and shoot with my flex and 2 tight ends. I had Kelsey and an Eifert going. So I had 1 running back going, and it was either one of those guys that I told you went down. It was like a CJ2K, a Blunt. It was a Rawls for a while. It was good. It was nice, but it wasn't I wasn't throwing out an awesome running back each week, but I was throwing out a stacked wide receiver and a stacked duo of tight ends. So you can win leagues without that running back.
I'll even say this, since you brought up the point, in my main league where we expanded our starting lineup, where we still have 3 wide receivers that we start, but we added a flex. So what I found to be interesting, so instead of having, your 9-player starting lineup, it's a 10-player lineup. And what do people do with that flex when there's 12 teams, right? And the interesting fact was that a lot of people would go wide receiver. Maybe say 5 of them are using a wide receiver. 4 of them are using a running back in that flex spot. And the other 3 teams are using tight ends in that flex spot. And it's based on the type of scoring that we had. And I found it to be extremely interesting that, you would think, well, now I can hoard a certain position. Well, what it also means is that you don't want to be too deep into one position because you want to have more flexibility throughout your lineup. And that being that extra spot, especially when you're getting to bye weeks and things like that, well, they're all playing. So you better have a good idea. And the teams that were more successful, though, were the ones that were either starting because we have a bonus thing where tight ends start scoring points earlier. So it was either the tight ends or the wide receiver teams that did better. Those teams that are stacking and playing 3 running backs, and the numbers proved it from what we saw that we're looking through from last year, they lost because that guy in your flex spot, you're lucky to get to 12, 13 points out of him, where the other guy is throwing in, whether it be a Dante Moncrief here for a week or whatever, and the guy puts up 18, 20, 22, 23 points.
No, it's true, and you just look, and I think that there's more wide receivers that are going to be having good seasons next year. I think that you almost are 25 deep at the position. Think about it; it's another good. There's going to be another 3 or 4 good starting from day one wide receivers that are rookies as well. Treadwell, depending on where he goes, could be a nice play. In the Amare role, you got last year's Kevin White, who didn't play a snap. It will be playing this year, so that could be interesting with the Cutler. And then obviously a guy I'm super high on is Corey Coleman. If that guy can get to the right team, God, if he could be like the new Steve Smith Sr. and go to like the Panthers and be their kind of electric wide receiver for Cam Newton, or in another situation, that guy is a man amongst my boys. Whenever I saw him play, but Baylor was one of the teams that I actually got to watch a few times, he was the best player on the field offensively. He was just couldn't be guarded. So there's a lot of wide receiver influx that's going to come and be ready to play from day one. There's a couple maybe at running back we saw this year. Gurley made it happen. Who's the other guy that got taken off early in the first round, mid-round?
Melvin Gordon.
Dude on the Chargers. Gordon. How did he play for you? Terrible. The running back position, the learning curve is a bit steeper to come right into the league, step in and do it. Obviously, we know that David Johnson had a great situation too, but I think that was due to a lot of injury and being on an awesome team that kind of just – it was perfect what he was doing. It's like, just use your raw talent. We'll see what happens with Carlos Williams. There's a community there with Gillislee and McCoy.
There's always
just a lot of
– It's a lot of question marks.
There's always question marks. who can you rely on you're going to sit there and be like, this guy's going to get me at least 20 carries this week?
And here's the other reason too, because with the amount of passing that has been going on, so like, remember, let's go back to 2006 again. You had the top quarterback threw for 4,400 yards. Okay. You go down to you had the number 12 quarterback, who was Rex Grossman, threw for 3,193. So the difference there is that when you go to 2015 and you have the number of quarterbacks that were throwing over 4,000 yards, which is 12. Okay. So whereas that 12th quarterback, Rex Grossman, before was only averaging and throwing for 200 yards per game, these quarterbacks now at the 12 are averaging 250 yards per game. So those were yards that were going to running backs that are no longer going there because they're throwing the ball. And maybe they're getting some running backs as receiving, but the proliferation of going from 2 wide receiver sets to 3 and 4 wide receiver sets have become the norm in the NFL. And with that being the norm, that is just creating so many more opportunities for these wide receivers to score more points, especially as you said. What are these guys who are getting the running backs? You know, what's their yard per carry? Well, what's the yard per catch average for some of these guys who may only get, you know, how about a guy like Dorial Green-Beckham next year? You don't think you'll like the upside of what this guy's bringing to the table? His size, his speed, and his amount of yards per catch, it's crazy.
I love the upside there. It's gonna be a very interesting to watch, and actually to give a little Pyro promo. Check out our website, Pyromaniac.com. Pyromaniac Mo just did a fantasy football talk with Denny Carter, and he's from late round fantasy, late round QB. And those guys kind of are the studs, and they also do this streaming podcast, and it's Denny Carter's awesome. He's one of the best guys to follow on Twitter. Smart guy, but it's a really, really, really smart fantasy football talk that they had a couple days ago. Check it out. It's a podcast. It's like 48 minutes on our website. Really great insight on streaming quarterbacks and looking at those numbers where if you just said 12 guys are having over 4,000 yards, think about that. That means in a 12-man league, you are essentially able to get, with taking the last quarterback, you're going to get a guy that can wing the ball for 4,000 yards. So day and times have changed for that position, or not really changed. It's changed for that position, but there's more depth. There's more depth at the quarterback position than we've ever seen, and it's creating more opportunities for these wide receivers. And again, the way that the league is going, that's where people care about, right? Because it's like, if you're going to build a winning team, and this goes back to even when it was, remember, CJ2K back with the Titans when he was leading the way, and then we go back to some of our podcasts. One of my favorite lines was, you show me the team that has a running back as their best player on their team, and I'm going to show you a team that's not making the playoffs. No, it's true. It's a good point. Now, here's a question. So Alshon Jeffrey, we know he's banged up, but still, when he's in there, he's an elite guy. I think a lot of people points are signaling that the Bears are going to re-sign him, so he's going to be able to keep going and firing it up with Cutler. Now, in this discussion of running back versus wide receiver, when you're talking about Hiltons, when you're talking about Mike Evanses, when you're talking about Alshon Jeffries, when you're talking about Cooks, let's say that's that third, maybe fourth tier of wide receivers. Are you wanting to get those guys, or would you rather get one of the running backs that we discussed? Whether Hill's a bad example, but let's say an Ingram, a Forte, an Ivory, a Lamar Miller, Doug Martin, who's going to go much higher than that, but it's going to be a bad pick. Anybody who takes Doug Martin in the first round is going to just get screwed. But what are your thoughts? Are you still higher on those 4 wide receivers than the mention in that zone of running backs that I'm talking about for constructing your team to be a champion?
It's about know your league too. So usually most of the leagues that I'm in are the ones that reward for the longer touchdowns. So guys like Alfred Morris and whatever are completely off of my table to begin with, because if you can't break a long run, I don't want you. So the guys that are interesting to me there are like a Latavius Murray's, the Lamar Millers, the guys that can just take it to the house really quickly. So, but at the same time, am I that excited about those guys? No, I feel that I'll get more consistent play out of those wide receivers. And the other fact of the matter is that I know that when you just wait, if you go back almost every year for the last 5 years, and you take who are the top 10 running backs through the first say 6 weeks of the season. Now let's go through weeks 7 through 12, the next 6 weeks. It's probably a different set of running backs. You maybe got a couple guys that are the same, but injuries are so prolific. It's why we always talk about using the waiver wire. It's also why, I like grabbing some of these younger rookie running backs or second-year running backs later in your drafts because nobody's paying attention to them, but they're going to get the opportunity when the injury happens in front. And so I think that you have, when we look at the top running backs, so let me pull it back up here. So the top running backs last year, when you have guys like Darren McFadden in the top 10, Chris Ivory, even Frank Gore, for crying out loud, that's just a matter of staying healthy, right? That was like when MJD led the league in rushing. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't because he was the best running back, because he was the only one that played 16 games.
Yeah, and then there was one standing. It's true. And think about this with running back, yet another reason. Now, you can get good pickups on the waiver wire at the wide receiver position. There's no doubt about it. But you can't get running back type waiver wire action for wide receivers. On the championship day, I picked up Mike Gillislee, and I've said this before. Picked him up 5 minutes before my championship because Dez Bryant was ruled out, and I didn't play Danny Woodhead, who had played on Thursday night. On the day of the championship, you can make a pickup, and that guy scored 25 points in the championship for you. 3 weeks earlier than that, Tim Hightower picked up more teams on the ESPN.com that had the championship teams. The number one running back across all the teams that were on championships, more championship teams had Tim Hightower on them than any other running back. And that was a pickup. 3 weeks left in the season.
You also, remember at the very beginning of the season, those people who did not perform well had all those horrible first-round busts, but you picked up Deion Lewis. How did that help you for the first 5 weeks of the season? That was then how about the people that also picked up Thomas Rawls? And then they supplanted themselves from weeks 5 through 10 or 11, until he went down.
Yeah, no, you're not going to be able to. So at the running back position, it's a war of attrition. And if you've got a deep team and you got a big bench, let's get those studs, fill out your team at the wide receiver position, fill out your team nicely, get some good running backs, knowing that probably they're going to get banged up or underperform, but get some depth at that position for later and be a badass on the pickups. Your pickup piece on a weekly basis is pretty amazing. We bring it out. We talk about it all the time. You put it out faster than anybody else out there. So if you're in a league where you're able to first come, first serve and pick it up, amen, dude. We have your pickup piece usually is up by halftime of the Sunday night football game. And then after that game, you'll litter in more guys the next day. And then after the Monday night games on Monday or whatnot, you'll add more players if so be it, if there should be. So pickups, just be a badass, stay on top of it. Don't just pick up and drop guys, and have this carousel of teams. Make the right pickups. But wide receiver, get that depth, pounce on them, and you might just have that one guy that's just like, oh my God, my team won it this year because my pickups. And that was the reason why I won it this year. Rawls, Gillislee, really pickups, and that reason why I won the fucking championship. And 10 years ago, or even more than that, in 2004, the reason why I won the championship that year, I remember hands down, was because Dominic Rhodes, what's his name on the Colts, went down. Edwin James went down. Dominic Rhodes, a name I hadn't even heard until that point, picked up. Boom, Charcantric West. We thought Niall Davis was going to be the backup. No one even knew Charcantric West's name, and even the other guy who went ahead of Niall Davis.
Spencer Ware.
Yeah, Spencer Ware. Think about that. So just names you don't even know. The last thing I'll say on this, Danny Woodhead. I posted it last night or this morning to our Facebook page and last night on Twitter. Finished in PPR leagues, number 3 in points. PPR, Danny Woodhead. You were able to get that guy. I think I got him in the 13th or something round. Every year he's healthy. He's a top 20 guy. Last year he was 3 at the PPR position. You can get this value at the running back position like no other position out there. So go for the wide receivers.
Yeah, I think to me it makes perfect sense. If you set yourself up and if you start 3 wide receivers or you start 2 wide receivers in a flex and you spend your first 3 picks on wide receivers, odds are you don't have to worry about that position the rest of the year. It's done. Yeah. And those guys do stay healthy. As long as you don't get the guy that just runs over the middle and just gets blown up, but there aren't too many Tom Waddle-like type players left in the NFL anymore. You're not counting on a Cole Beasley to be a number one wide receiver. So instead of drafting those guys, which are the guys that you're going to be picking up through the fodder later if you're waiting on a wide receiver, wouldn't you rather have the three studs and then know that where you and I have been talking about all these running backs come out of nowhere every single year? There's usually about a handful of at least 5 to 8 running backs that come out of nowhere. So that are always picked up off of the waiver wire. All that does is give you the extra ammunition. Set yourself up with all these wide receivers. Be locked and loaded with the top producers that are going to give you those points. And then you're going to find these other guys to fill in your roster.
It's a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer. Well, I think we covered a lot of stuff here. We've gone for about an hour show, which is perfect. I think that's where we should sit it. Is there any kind of last thoughts or that you have on a running back, kind of going with them earlier over the wide receivers? Any stats you want to get? Any players you want to cover? Or should we just say? I'm late for church, so I could probably go and sit and go see the Lord above. What do you got? Any more ammo?
No, I think I'll be interested. I'm going to put out again the article that I have that's in my draft manifesto. I will update that and then put that out as a separate article here in the off season. Probably have it out there, within a month. So that way, everyone can digest all this information and you can just see. What I need to do is I need to get a Stag Party on it to help make a nice chart. So you can just see how it has completely, the needle has completely moved from one side to the other. It'll be really interesting to see.
Well, I think that would be a great kind of really in-depth expose, so to speak, of the position and the way it is now, to really look and say, hey, who are the busts at running back? Who are the busts at the wide receiver position? What are the odds of each of those happening? And really looking at the empirical data on that to help make some of these decisions. I'm a believer in fantasy football that you got to use your heart and your soul and make some gut calls. It can't all be about the data, but at the same time, I'm a wide receiver lover. I always have been. I'm a wide receiver guy. So this new way and this new dawn is kind of the way I've always been anyways. And like I said earlier, my running when people are walking and walking when people are running almost tells me more that maybe this year in some weird way, if I'm later on, that maybe I will go totally against the grain. And after those first 2 rounds, end up with like a Le'Veon Bell and, maybe a David Johnson and just say, all right, I'm changing it up. And now I've got it. But I hope not, because I love wide receivers and all this, the talk that we've had here has kind of shown you. It's a passing game.
What you just said is the reason for me, because this year with the championship that I won, both of us winning our old time leagues, mine was with the first pick of Julio Jones and then having a Mike Evans and what he could have been, man, if he didn't drop so many passes. But how much stronger I felt about my team with the base being an amazing wide receiver. I felt so much better about watching my team every week than I did when it was, loaded up on running backs in the first round.
Absolutely. Well, Pyromaniac Mo bounced in, and one thing he mentioned, he said, you did know, if you listen to Pyro Podcast, you did know Cantrick West's name before Jamal Charles went down. Pat, I love you, Mo. Me and Mo are actually going to be doing a blab in a few hours here, so that'll be good. We're going to be doing bounce back players and breakout players in that blab, so that'll be a good one. But Pyromaniac Mo's got a question here, and it says, if you have one of the first 4 picks, are you still going wide receiver? And we covered that a bit earlier in the show. Absolutely. Yes. I'm not saying if I'm at the 4th pick and Antonio Brown, Julio, and let's say, I don't know, ODB are gone. Am I consider? Can I take Allen Robinson over
DeAndre Hopkins?
DeAndre Hopkins, if he's got a quarterback situation, it's a totally different. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm taking a Hopkins over an AP or a Le'Veon Bell. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm not, but because I would love to do that, but I might not be able to have the cojones to do it. But if I can get a Julio, an ODB, and an Antonio Brown, boom, I'm taking them over any of those running backs. It just, I didn't do it last year, and I was kicking myself all season, even with AP when he would have a good game. It's like you look at the other side, and be like, Yeah, but look at what Julio did. He just had 9 catches, 2 TDs, and threw up 150 yards. Like, I just want that.
I agree.
It's more fun to watch for me as well. So, and it's important to me to be able to watch those guys. So, Houdini, good job, my friend. I know you're jonesing right now for a coffee. So go out to your Dunkin' Donuts that I know that they tore down. There used to be like the most oldest
I don't like the Dunkin' that's by me because it's right by the train station. So instead, I'll go. I got a Pete's Coffee, or I got like a couple little nice coffee shops. I got more choices in this area now. So
there you go. Pizza. You like the high octane
absolutely,
stuff.
man.
Good. Well, I had my Starbucks earlier today, and good stuff, man. Always love talking fantasy football with you. Enjoy your Sunday, and any of you guys out there that were watching live, thank you for popping in. We appreciate that. I'll be putting this up on YouTube and posting it to Pyromaniac.com, so you can go back and look at it later, and that allows people that weren't able to watch it live to check out the show. So. Amazing. Good stuff. Houdini, enjoy your day. Thanks for joining us. That was running backs and wide receivers, which way to go in your early rounds. Me and Houdini, and I'm D-Rex, believe that wide receiver is the way to go. But be smart and never go into any draft with preconceived, predetermined routes. Always take the best value. And, we just kind of believe right now the wide receivers with that, and the value lies there.
Absolutely.
Later, buddy. Bye, guys. Pyromaniac.com.
Later.
Out.